Hey, everybody. Hope you're having an awesome day. We're supposed to be recording Avi Loeb today, and he is about 3 minutes late. So we're hoping it's just technological difficulties. I mean, he is a Harvard professor.
He's busy guy.
The guy must have read the email. It's 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. Here we are, 11:04. So we're hoping he joins us, but we have a full plethora of things to ask him about. There's a lot going on. He's writing reports on motherships. He is exploring the ocean. He's doing things for the government. He's continuing his scientific-based approach. And I want to kind of put him on the spot a little bit today because I really like him, but a lot of people give him a hard time and they say maybe he's a little, plays it safe or is a little reluctant to go into certain UFO realms and that kind of thing. So I want to find out, who is Avi Loeb? And I think he's humble enough and he knows us enough by now. He won't take offense.
Nice.
But I want to ask him, who are you? What's motivating you? Where are you coming from? And, what's behind it all? So
we're going to Oprah. We're just going to get Oprah on him. You know what I mean?
We do that anyway, don't we?
Yeah, I know. But just let's be extra Oprah today.
And we'll get a tissue box.
Yeah.
And, but Oprah gave stuff away. Like the last few years of her career, she was giving away cars and houses.
We're podcasters. We don't have that budget.
We don't got that kind of money.
No, not that kind of money.
And so anyway, we'll roll the music here. By the way, we want to give a shout out to Contact in the Desert. Avi's going to be doing a remote lecture with that, and we'll give you more details later on in the show. So we'll run the music, Jay, and hopefully Avi's back by the time we're here.
Let's do it.
Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of UAP Studies Podcast. My name is Louis Borges. Joining me, as always, my good buddy and co-host, Jason Gilmet.
Hey, I am very, very happy to be here today, Louis, because we have Avi Loeb. It's been 2 weeks, actually, since Louis and I have recorded anything. And I am nervous as heck this morning because we've got 2 interviews, and the first one after a 2-week break is none other than Professor Avi Loeb. So I'm like I said, you guys are going to have to hold me today because I'm barely hanging on. I'm just yeah.
Okay, we got you, man. If you fall, we'll catch you. Trust fall.
Yeah.
And as many of you know, Avi Loeb is a theoretical physicist, the chair of astronomy for Harvard University, best-selling author, and the head of the Galileo Project. And Avi, something funny happened before the show. We're 5 minutes late, and I'm thinking, how does a Harvard professor not get the time right on the email? And you just told us something amazing that you may have discovered in the early hours this morning that could potentially change physics in general. So welcome to the show. And why are you 5 minutes late?
Thank you. Well, I should first confess that half of my DNA is German, and I should be punctual. But my wife told me that the only date we had when I was on time was the first date. That's what my wife said, because after that, I got her attention. I was not on time. Now, the reason is this morning, I came across an idea that could potentially reveal the nature of dark matter. And that was very exciting. And it came by chance. There is some new data. I cannot discuss it at the moment because we have to make sure that it works. But this is an example of how science is done. You just try to interpret data that looks puzzling. And actually, anyone in the field would agree that it's puzzling. And we looked at various explanations, and all of them did not agree with this data, and this is completely new data, publicly available. And we were about to write together with my collaborator Hamsa Padmanabhan, who I mentor. She's a postdoc, and she read my textbook on the first galaxies and came to me and said that she learned a lot from it. And since then we collaborated for almost a couple of years now. And so we were looking at the data and pretty much planning how to write a paper by which we will admit that all possible solutions have a problem, okay? Because quantitatively, they cannot explain the data in a natural way. And we were about to go that direction. And then I said, wait a minute, there is this other possibility. And why don't we check whether we can explain it that way? And the thing is that this other possibility, if it works, tells us something about the dark matter, and there is only one free parameter there, and there is no way to fit a complex data set just with one parameter if it's not real, So this is the beauty of physics, that if it's correct, then things click. And also it will explain some past anomalies about the dark matter that were not explained. So stay tuned, we are working on it. And it's just an example for how science can be exciting. It doesn't need to be boring. You just have to think outside the box sometimes. And we can talk about it in the context of UAP if you want.
Yeah. And I mean, you are very humble and you minimize that, but let's think about that. If you have discovered things that are so enigmatic when it comes to dark matter, every physicist is chasing that. If you've literally figured that out, this is Nobel Prize material, and you guys are hearing about it first on UAP Studies. So we're very happy that you shared this with us. Again, we're here to chat UAPs, but in understanding UAP is understanding science. You are a scientist. You always say, I'm using the scientific method. You get a lot of people throw stones sometimes at you, and sort of, I wanted to ask about that because we know you, we chat before the show and we've had you on about 6 months ago. So we understand you, we know your rhetoric, and a lot of these people that are just debunkers or want to throw stones may not. So to clear that up, who is Avi Loeb? Is there a UFO enthusiast deep down in there? Is this strictly a science expedition? Is this humanitarian based? Like, what is motivating you to do what you do?
Right. Well, it has nothing to do with ulterior motives. It's basically following the evidence. And just like in the case of dark matter we were talking about, by the way, I'm not sure it will solve it. It's work in progress, what we discussed. But the point is, if there is intriguing evidence, you better get more data or try to figure it out the scientific way. And this requires work, okay? This requires expertise. You have to learn what physics is about. You have to learn about the laws of physics before you think about new physics. That's elementary, right?
Sure.
I mean, Pablo Picasso, when he started painting, he didn't paint cubism on the first few pictures that he painted realistically. That was the traditional way. You can't invent disruptive innovation without knowing the fundamentals of what was done beforehand. And that's what a lot of people in the public do not understand. They just sit on their sofa and say, oh, well, the hole in the cloud is new physics. It could be perhaps a wormhole or some portal for faster than light travel. Why not? Why not use quantum teleportation? All kinds of crazy ideas. And the point is, that's not the way science is done. In order to argue for new physics, you need exquisite data that doesn't leave you any other possible interpretation. In other words, there is no other option but new physics. That's the only way to find new physics. Whereas a lot of people think, oh, I have some crappy data. I don't measure the distances to some dark objects above Ukraine, and therefore there is new physics associated with these UAP that the astronomers reported above Ukraine. And I say, if you don't have distance measurements, then don't argue for new physics. Just argue for lower distances so that these are artillery shells. Okay, that's common sense. So I'm not subscribing to any fantasy. I'm just trying to say we need to gather evidence. If we see something intriguing, like dark objects above Ukraine, okay, then go ahead and do triangulation and make sure you know the distance, and only then start talking about dark objects at a distance of 10 kilometers above the escape speed from Earth. You can't do that before you measure distances, okay? That's elementary. But when I point this out, a lot of believers, quote unquote, attack me. And I say, look, science is not a matter of belief, okay? It's not like religion. It's not like politics. It's not a matter of opinion. There is a reality out there. And what that means is the reality is out there. All you need to do is collect more information about that reality, okay? So that you can figure out what's going on. Just like a detective story, okay? Of course, you can jump to conclusions immediately, and then you will be wrong most of the time. If a detective would just see a few elements of the crime scene and say, I know who the criminal is, forget about it, let's move on, then that detective might be fired within a day. because that's not the way to reach conclusions. But in the context of UAP, in the context of politics, in the context of religion, it works because there are groups of people that invented the storyline, and they all support each other, believing this storyline in all these contexts, politics, religion, UAP, and they support each other. And then you have another camp of people like skeptics that also invent a storyline completely arbitrarily, just like the other group, and they fight each other, and they say things about each other, and they hate each other. Now, in politics, it leads to polarization. The country is torn apart, and violence is initiated when the two herds, like the two groups, confront each other because both of them make no sense. Like they are not. Instead, what the intelligent approach would be is, in the context of scientific matters like UAP, let's not invent a storyline to start with. Let's just collect data, evidence, and let it guide us. Because after all, without seeing unusual objects in the sky, without detecting the first interstellar objects, for me as an astronomer, I would never be intrigued. So I was not approaching it. If you ask, who is Avi Loeb? Avi Loeb was never interested in extraterrestrials to start with. The only reason I got to this is because there was this object, Oumuamua, that looked strange and weird, and I wrote a book about it. And then everyone attacked me in the scientific community, and I said, the hell, if they attack me just because I'm paying attention to evidence, I will continue to pay attention to evidence. Why should I back down on that? And then the other people, the believers of UAP being they also attack me when I try to apply the scientific method. I don't care about these groups. I'm not motivated by being popular. I don't care how many likes I have on Twitter. It's completely irrelevant. If you ask me what defines my approach, it's basically my childhood. I was a kid born on a farm. I'm connected to nature. I respect nature more than the gospel. I don't care what people say. That's completely irrelevant because people were wrong over and over again. People want to empower themselves. They want us to be at the center of the world, center of the universe. Turned out to be wrong. Sorry about that. Galileo suffered. They put him in house arrest. Today, they would have canceled him on social media. Who cares? The Earth continued to move around the sun. That's what I said before. Reality is whatever it is, even if you don't look at it, it remains the same. It's your problem because you don't adapt to it. You don't get the information about it with your storyline. So the storyline of the Catholic Church was the Earth is at the center of the universe. Okay, that was the storyline. Everyone believed it because it flattered their ego. The clergy believed in it because it gave them political power. And as a result of that, because of this political power that was based on the idea that God pays attention to the whereabouts of people, they wanted to enforce this doctrine. And when Galileo argued otherwise, they put him in house arrest. So that's an example of scientific truth which is pushed away, but it doesn't change the fact that reality is described by it. And, there was this famous quote by Schopenhauer, the philosopher, who said that any truth goes through three stages. The first one is that it's ridiculed. Okay, that's what Galileo went through. That's what UAP studies go through. It's ridiculed. So people are not engaged even in checking whether it's right or wrong, just have an opinion. The second phase is that it's being opposed by people saying it's not true. Okay, so that's a situation where they actually engage with the idea, but they say it's not true, it's wrong, and so forth. And the third stage is when everyone says, oh, it's self-evident. And in fact, people talked about it for many. So how do you transition from one stage to another? The only way is by collecting evidence so that it will be indisputable, beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, you ask, why are people not engaged in that? It's so simple. It's just like a key to a castle. Okay, you're given the key, you open the door. Instead, people are bumping against the door with great force and saying, I know the answer, I know. That's not the way to do it. Why aren't people looking for the key, which is basically scientific evidence? In the case of UAP, until the Galileo Project, there was never a scientific project dedicated to collecting data 24/7 from the sky, analyzing it with the best computer algorithms. Why? Why wasn't it done? Well, because it requires work, because there was a stigma. And those people who do not want to engage in the hard work associated with collecting scientific, it takes time. The Galileo Project took a year to start assembling the state-of-the-art instruments, putting them together into an observatory, which is now functioning, and we can talk about it. But it took a lot of time, dozens of people, purchasing the relevant components, putting them together, making sure that things work. It's work. It's a lot of work. It's much easier to just comment on that on Twitter or in essays and blogs and so forth, and then retreating to your tribe that claims the same thing and feeling good within the tribe. That's much easier. But the point is, science is not politics. You see, in politics, people can have their opinion. But in science, it's not a matter of opinion. There is a reality out there. We need to figure it out. And who cares what the opinion of people, are, the opinions. And, as a scientist, I feel like I'm loyal to my childhood curiosity. So I grew up on a farm, connected to nature, not to people. And that means that, when I felt frustrated going to dinner as a kid, because the adults in the room, when I asked a difficult question, they would ignore it, or they would invent a storyline that made no sense. So as a kid, I said, the hell with it. I'll try and figure out the truth by collecting better evidence as a scientist. That was my goal. And the privilege of being a scientist is that you can figure out the answer. Okay, that's the beauty. You don't need to go back and ask the government to give you their classified data. You don't need to go back and read history books. You can say, okay, the sky is not classified. I'll collect my data. I can look at the sky. What's the problem? I can order from Amazon the instruments I need. I just need funding, and gladly I received generous funding from a lot of donors that were inspired by my book, Extraterrestrials. So that problem was solved. So once I know what to do, I go ahead and do it. Why do I need to read all these history books, and insist on the government declassifying things that they don't want to declassify simply because of national security concerns about their sensors? I don't need the government to tell me what's true and what's not. The government is not a scientific organization.
Right.
So the trademark of my approach is based on evidence and being independent, and also not caring about how many likes, not belonging to a tribe, going the middle ground, which is guided by common sense. And unfortunately, common sense is not common.
Yeah, and we've seen this over and over again, like you mentioned, with scientists throughout the past, coming out with theories and then being able to prove that their theories, hold up, that through repetition of the experiment. And at first, it's always, we've seen countless movies where, a professor came up with a new theory, or physics is explaining it to a whole room full of other professors are like, oh, I disagree. And this is offensive. And we've seen this over and over again. And I often think about this subject because, a person in your position, sir, and you are super busy all the time. And the fact that you're able to devote your time even to come on our podcast and talk about it, shows who you are as a person, right? And how tenacious you are in seeking and getting answers to what you want, and not relying on the government, not relying on other scientists.
I also see it as an important service to educating both the public, but also my academic colleagues about how science is done. Because you see, it's not, the problem is not just with the public that is not professional or not doesn't have the information necessary. It's also with my colleagues in academia that are not following the scientific method because they pretend they know much more than they actually know. Okay, because that's good for their stature. It's good for maintaining, not taking risks. Not so. The lesson to be learned is, if we do find with the Galileo Project, if we do find objects that are not human-made and are not natural, they're not birds, they're not gadgets with made in China labels on them. Mm-hmm. If there's something else outside of this earth, then that would be a very important lesson to the scientific community that, we should basically be guided by evidence. And there is nothing new in this message. Galileo Galilei tried to convey it, look through the telescope, don't assume anything in advance, but we keep forgetting it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And good point that what you said as far as the Galileo Project collects its own data. You're not relying on the government or some magic to be declassified. You guys have visual sensors, infrared, passive radio. You're doing your own thing. And last time you were on our show was about 6 months ago. And I remember at that time you had been given, I think it was $250,000 to do a deep sea expedition looking
no,
for
1.5 million.
Oh, now, yeah, but initially this was like I think November when you were on, and it was just your kind of preliminary look. And so I guess maybe you can summarize what it was. As far as I understand, it was an asteroid or a meteorite that broke up over the Pacific Ocean, like 100 miles off of Papua New Guinea. But something about that led you to believe that it may not have just been a meteorite, correct? That maybe you can elaborate on.
Yeah, so Oumuamua, this first reported interstellar object, was the size of a football field, and it was discovered because it reflected sunlight. It didn't collide with the Earth, it just moved past the Earth at a distance that is roughly 1/6 of the Earth-Sun separation. But then we discovered, together with my student, Amir Siraj, that there were two previous encounters with objects that came from outside the solar system. They were reported by the US government, and these were meteors, roughly a meter in size. These are objects that collided with the Earth and burnt up in the Earth atmosphere. The first one was from January 8th, 2014, so almost 4 years before Oumuamua. And it exploded above the Pacific Ocean at an elevation of about 10 kilometers. We calculated that its speed was so high that it couldn't have originated from the solar system, must have arrived to the solar system. In fact, outside the solar system, it moved faster than 95% of all the stars near the sun. So it was really fast moving relative to even stars relative to the sun in the vicinity of the sun. So we wrote a paper about it, and the paper was not accepted for publication because the referees said, we don't believe the US government. They didn't provide us with the data, with uncertainties. So then it took 3 years for the US Space Command to release a letter to NASA confirming that this is an interstellar object at a 99.999% confidence. And at that point, our paper was accepted for publication. So that was 3 years later, 2022. And moreover, the government released data about the fireball when the object exploded as a result of friction with the air. And we calculated that its material strength must have been tougher than all other space rocks ever recorded by the government in the same catalog, 272 of them. So this was an outlier. Why would the first interstellar meteor be of material strength that is more than 10 times tougher than even iron meteorites, even iron? And so that was a puzzle. And of course, one possibility is that it's not natural, that it's a spacecraft made of some artificial alloy like stainless steel. On this point, I should mention that 3 years after Oumuamua was discovered, and I suggested that it was pushed by reflection of sunlight, there was another object that was actually discovered by the same telescope in Hawaii in September 2020, and it was given the name 2020 SO. It was also pushed by reflection of sunlight and had no cometary tail, just like Oumuamua. And then the astronomers realized that it was actually a rocket booster that was launched by NASA in 1966. And
oh, wow.
And it had thin walls made of stainless steel. That's why it didn't evaporate like a comet. And because of the thin walls, it was pushed by reflecting sunlight. So what I'm saying is the first thing, imagine Voyager, it's about to escape from the solar system. Imagine it in 1 billion years colliding with an exoplanet. It would appear as a meteor, interstellar meteor. And of course, the material composition would be very different than an iron meteorite or any other natural rock. So what we are planning is an expedition to the Pacific Ocean to scoop the ocean floor. It will not be easy because it's about 1 mile deep, and we already developed the machinery we plan to use, and we got funded at $1.5 million. All of my funding is private donations of people that were inspired. I never did any fundraising. They just came to me and said, you need to go on this expedition. Here is the money.
Wow.
So we are going there, hopefully in the summer of 2023. And we will collect any fragments that we might find from this meteor and then analyze their composition to see if we're dealing with an object of artificial origin or or maybe a natural object that came from an environment very different than the solar system. And that would be by itself also very exciting, because we will learn something new, no matter what.
And I learned, sorry, Jay, I was just gonna, because you mentioned Oumuamua, Avi, I learned something myself. I thought I had read every article on it, but I read something the other day that said that perhaps Oumuamua could have been a broken off piece of a Dyson sphere. And I thought that was amazing. You don't hear much about Dyson spheres. And for those who don't know, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but a Dyson sphere is like a mechanical structure built around the star in order to harness all of its potential energy. So if this is a broken off piece of something like that, it would explain the hardness and all the rest. So maybe you can elaborate on that.
Yeah, so that was an idea I had, because Oumuamua did not look like a functional device. It looked like more of a space trash situation where if it was thin and strong and flat, which, I mean, we inferred that it's most likely flat at a 90% confidence based on the reflectance, the reflection of sunlight as it was tumbling. The most likely structure was a flat disc-like structure rather than cigar-shaped, as was illustrated in many places. So the question is, what's the origin of such a piece of flat material that is thin? And I came across the idea a few months ago, and I published a paper about it, that, you know, if you imagine a Dyson sphere, which is tiled, you know, and the civilization may use it for 1 billion years, but then the star would, for example, evolve and become, you know, destroy life on the planet that gave rise to this technological civilization. The star, like the sun, you know, the sun will burn up the surface of Earth in 1 billion years. So if such a structure were to exist, it would basically push it out and break it up. Or you can break it up as a result of asteroid impacts. I calculated it's quite, you know, within 1 billion years, easily you can destroy all of it. So the idea is that such an abundant Dyson sphere that is not being used will be broken up and into pieces, and Oumuamua may have been a piece of that. And I actually calculated that the typical dimension of Oumuamua, the diameter, is comparable to what you expect from disruption by asteroids. So if we had a Dyson sphere in our solar system, these are the pieces that you would end up with as a result of asteroids hitting it. And so, and especially, you know, the one configuration that was talked about in the literature is making a Dyson sphere out of light sails, which are hovering above the star and are kept at a fixed distance by balancing the gravity towards the star with the radiation pressure that pushes it out. So if you balance the two, you can hover. And it's very easy to basically kick those systems, these tiles, out if the star gets brighter, you know, as the sun will get in the next 1 billion years, because they're hanging on the balance, these tiles. And if you just make the radiation pressure stronger, then you kick them out of the system. Much easier than to kick asteroids or rocks outside of a planetary system. So it offers an explanation for why such things would be more abundant in interstellar space than rocks that you kick out of a planetary system, which are bound gravitationally to the star. Here they were hovering, and just a little bit of a nudge can get them out. So altogether, you know, it's a possibility. And of course, there is the question, if in addition to space trash, you have some functional devices, like perhaps one or more of the UAP, the Unidentified Aerial Phenomena. Those are of a different nature. If they are functional, they should be probed. So it's a completely different story there.
Yeah. And I'm a huge science fiction fan, and I love books and movies where we discover something of alien technology, but in the movies, we always solve it, or we always find out what it is, or it turns out to be bad for us. At our current state of scientific awareness and investigations, if we were to find something that is from alien technology, like when you're doing your expedition in the summer, how ready are we to be able to see if we can reverse engineer this material? Is it possible that it's going to be so far advanced that we can't touch it for a few more centuries?
No, if it's material, we can probably figure out how to import such materials. That should be straightforward. But what I see as a challenge is, I think it's unlikely that we will encounter biological creatures which most of science fiction was based on, and a lot of religious people favor. And, again, it's irrelevant. What matters is really what can survive in space for the long journey. You see, because with chemical propulsion, the way we sent our spacecraft, the journey will take, almost 1 billion years to cross the Milky Way disk of stars, and that's a long time. You need a lot of patience, you need multiple generations. So biological creatures are really not tuned to survive such a long journey under the hazardous conditions of space. There are cosmic rays impacting the body of any biological creature. I don't think anything can survive that long, okay? So what is the solution? Well, it's in our hands right now. We are on the cusp of developing sentient artificial intelligence systems. Already, GPT-4 has 100 trillion connections, only a factor of 6 shy of the 600 trillion synapses in the human brain, okay? So we are already at a point where GPT 4.5 will be more complex than the human brain, okay?
Scary.
And what that means is, first of all, it will take us a long time to figure it out, because we have, look how many decades neuro scientists tried to figure out the human brain and weren't successful. So we will not easily figure out GPT 4.5 for the same reason we can't figure the human brain. It will take us a decade. So there will be, it's sort of like an alien baby that our technological belly gave birth to, okay? So why do I say alien? Because obviously you can train it on human-made texts, okay? That's what we are doing with these GPT systems. We are training them on content from the internet. But just like a baby that becomes a child, and eventually matures to become an adult because of its own personal experiences, in the same way, these systems will go beyond the training phase that we train them and start gaining experience from interactions with the world. And eventually they'll mature to be similar to adults that hold legal responsibility for their actions, because they become independent of the training period. Okay, we will have to adjust that with our legal system. But what I'm saying is, this could look like alien to us. This is not unprecedented. If you look at the history of Earth, you start with a soup of chemicals, then you get life. So life was really alien to Earth, to start with, which was just a soup of chemicals. And then, a few million years ago, suddenly you have human intelligence starting, to kick in, and that was alien to all the animals that inhabited Earth and still inhabit Earth, and human intelligence led to technologies, and now to AI, which is the next phase of an alien being created on Earth. Okay, and then of course the question is, will we encounter similar technologies or even more advanced technologies from interstellar space that visit us? Simply because there are other habitable exoplanets around stars that formed billions of years before the sun. So their technological clock was initiated before ours. And then we can sort of look at our future in a way. It's not a time machine. It's just seeing what will happen to us just because someone else went through that already. Okay, right. That's the other benefit of monitoring the sky for advanced technologies. And the way I think of it is that it will be AI astronauts. If we are talking about functional devices being UAP, these would be controlled by AI. Okay, that's the way I imagine it. And of course, we can use our AI to figure out their AI. A century ago, Alan Turing came up with the concept of the imitation game. That's what the Turing test is all about. He was thinking about our computers imitating humans, which is the Turing test that everyone is talking about. I'm thinking about something beyond that, which is our AI systems imitating extraterrestrial AI systems, okay? Because they're more advanced.
So you would use AI to help solve the problems or the enigmas that is part of UAP. That's crazy.
Yeah, that's my
crazy.
What
thinking.
better brain than an AI brain? It's going to outpace our own. So why wouldn't you use your best tool for that kind of deep study?
So here is the way I think about this. If indeed there are AI astronauts near Earth, okay, and they might provide a solution to Fermi's paradox. Basically, what they would say is, imagine those extraterrestrials watching Earth, okay, and they say, we were really amused looking at you guys, humans, because we would see NASA sending all these decades probes to Mars to look for microbes. And we would see the SETI community searching for this ancient technology, that we at the beginning of our science developed, which are radio signals. Who is using that anymore? Nobody. And you are looking for that from distant planets, while all the time we were sending packages to your mailbox, and only over the past decade, you checked if there are any objects around you, and you discover the first interstellar objects. These are the objects that astronomers discovered, and the US government is talking about some anomalous objects that they cannot explain as drones or balloons. And they would say, well, that's funny, because the answer to Fermi's paradox, where is everybody? The answer is simple. We are here. Congratulations to becoming intelligent and checking around you, like you were going very far away instead of checking around you first. And of course, that's the mark of an intelligent species. Instead of all the chatter that I hear all the time of people having opinions, and just this morning I got emails from two different people with opposite opinions. One of them is a skeptic and another one is a believer, and both of them attack me. And the defining signature or trademark of intelligence is stop the chatter that is uninformed and follow the evidence, the data. Collect evidence and follow whatever it tells you. That's really simple. That's what a kid does. And we invent these storylines and argue with each other and prevent each other from collecting the evidence. That makes no sense.
And today, especially in these days, it seems like science goes out the window the minute somebody's emotions is hurt, and it's crazy. And it's good to hear that a professor is still saying, no, if I'm going to teach, this is what I'm going to teach. You can't mess with science. Science tells you what the nature of the universe is, right?
Well, so there was even a Politico article a couple of days ago, and the reporter, Lara Seligman, interviewed me, and then she said, it's really strange because I spoke with someone with credentials in real estate, and he was negative about what you're doing. And I spoke with a scientist, astronomer, who was also negative. And it seems to me, I said, what do you make of it? She said, well, it seems to me like they're just jealous. And I say, well, I don't really care what they say, like the guy that has credentials in real estate, is just like a commentator on soccer. There's someone that sits on the bench and looks at soccer players and says, oh, you should have done it this way. But who is he to tell the soccer players how to play soccer? I mean, in this context of studying UAP, it's the work of a scientist. You need to be informed about the data. For example, the director of national intelligence, Avril Haines, she received a bachelor's degree in physics. Okay, and I met her in the Washington National Cathedral a year and a half ago, and she expressed the possibility that UAP might be extraterrestrial in origin. She just mentioned it in passing because she doesn't know what some of them are. Right. And then you hear people who are uninformed. She obviously is more informed than they are. She's more educated in physics than all these commentators. And they dare to say negative things like, where is it coming from? If you didn't see the evidence, that national intelligence agencies saw, and you are not seeking evidence, instead you are just ridiculing the search for evidence, then you are an anti-science person. Okay? You are not willing to go through the method of science in finding the truth, which is not different from what happened to Galileo. Those people who put Galileo in house arrest, not only that they objected to his conclusion, but they didn't want to look through the telescope. And it's exactly the same phenomena. People wanting to prevent the assembly of new data, new evidence that will guide us. And I say, well, didn't we advance over the past 4 centuries? Don't we think of ourselves as a scientific culture that promotes evidence? But no, just look how people react to this subject. In the mainstream of science, not willing to entertain that possibility and pushing against others doing that, and in the general public as well. So it has nothing to do with whether it's within academia or outside. It's just that both sides need to be educated about how science is done. And I would have hoped that after 4 centuries following what happened to Galileo, we would realize that, the Earth would move around the sun irrespective of what you do to Galileo.
Yeah. And I think healthy debate is good because both sides have a healthy knowledge of the facts. Like, I get your opinion and why you're saying that, but I have my own. It's when you have debunkers, people that have a predisposition that no matter what you tell me, my mind is already made up. And in a lot of cases, these people don't even do the work. They aren't in the field. They're just from the outside throwing rocks on the inside. And the report you were mentioning, is this the report you wrote with Sean Kirkpatrick regarding mothership?
Okay. So let me just say a few words about that. That was just a paper talking about how to use known physics to put constraints on UAP. Okay, that's all. Known physics to put constraints on UAP. And we mentioned in the introduction some scenario of how probes will arrive to Earth. And frankly, I was not sure that there is enough content there because we didn't show any new data. Okay, as I said, scientific knowledge is promoted. Yet, there was a huge amount of attention given to this unpublished paper just because I collaborate with the head of Aero, this office in government established by the US Congress. And here again, I say, to those people who do not have the information that the government has and that do not have the knowledge of physics, that you should not comment on something you don't know, okay? And it's just, you can enjoy a soccer match, but you shouldn't tell the players how to play.
Well said.
Yeah.
And that's always, even when we're talking about Louis was just brushing up on it, and it's like they'll have somebody on TV like yourself, a Harvard professor, a great thinker, somebody who's actually doing something in science instead of just, writing papers about theories that we've already all heard of. You're actually pushing, science where it's supposed to go. But they'll have a person like yourself on a show, then they'll have Jim Bob who disagrees with you. And Jim Bob does not have the same credentials as you do, does not have the amount of years of knowledge and research that you have. And quite frankly, sometimes not even the mental fortitude that, you seem to be very alert and some people aren't. And that's what I find funny is that they'll have to, they'll make it look as if it has equal weight on the TV show. Well, what do you think, right?
Yeah, the main difference between just a commentator and myself is not so much the knowledge and so forth. It's more to do with the commitment. Okay, so I'm putting my time into the Galileo Project, allocating funds for assembly of observatories that collect new data. As we speak, very soon we'll have more data than ever publicized in any UAP report of the past. Very soon, the Galileo Project is already collecting data all the time, 24/7. We will have a huge data set, and we will continue in the coming months and years, okay? So I'm working hard at this task, okay? And instead of criticizing what I say, just support the effort, because I will follow whatever the evidence shows. So if you know what the answer would be, you can just say, okay, it's just like betting on the outcome of a soccer match. You can say, I know that this team will win. Fine, have a gamble with your friends, but don't attack the players for playing the game, okay? So the point is, unless you are putting time and effort into the business of gathering, seeking the information, seeking the data, seeking the evidence, you cannot criticize those who do it, because they put their time and effort, and you are just blogging and talking about it and commenting about it. It always strikes me that those movie critics, they never created a movie, okay? They don't know how much work is involved, and they still can destroy, the life of an actor, the life of a director, just by saying negative things. And you think about it, it's completely inappropriate, okay? Because someone else is putting the time and effort.
Yeah, good point.
I got on my notes here and I wanted to ask this. So we had Dr. Gary Nolan on a couple of months ago, and I asked him about metamaterials. And I said, hey, I heard there was this piece of metal supposedly from like the 40s from a craft. Art Bell had it, and then Linda Moulton Howe had it, and then TTSA got it. And as I'm talking, he starts to disappear off screen. So I just keep asking my question. And after about 10 seconds, I'm like, you better be looking for some metamaterials. Like, what are you doing? And he pulls out this little black thing with a stone in it. He's like, yeah, here it is right here. It's like in his own home, personal study, he's holding this piece of metal. I think it's also rumored it's called arts parts, people refer to it as. But it's a piece of metal of some sort, metamaterial, bismuth and magnesium layers. Nobody can figure out what a practical use would be for it. The cost in making it would be so astronomical that there's no way that it's a commercial benefit to doing this. And they can't even figure if it came from this planet because of the just the signature of the alloys, right? So what are your thoughts
on these kinds of signatures? The only concern I have, I agree, it's very intriguing. The only issue is, if a hacker wanted to fool us, then they would have done it. Like, for example, there are stories about remote places where suddenly a spaceship appeared to a bunch of kids or somewhere, that is not monitored. And, maybe something like that did happen. I mean, it's quite likely that something happened, but it's possible. Then you ask yourself, okay, is it possible that a hacker who wanted to create a legend or some story would do that? If it's possible to do it by someone who decided to hire or rent an airplane and just land there in a very strange way and impress those people who never saw an airplane of this sort, and that can be done. Okay, so as long as it can be done by someone with the ambition of hacking you, and there are other stories like, Skinwalker Ranch, and the geographical location is very well known. So you can imagine some people saying, oh, let's fool these guys. They're really looking for something. Let's produce something that they would go crazy about. And then they go crazy about it. And you say, oh, well, what's the chance that this would happen in this ranch? Well, because you will reveal the geographic coordinates to anyone. And there are many people that have nothing better to do than to hack. Okay. And you see it on the internet. So my point is, if you can imagine a scenario for something that you see as unusual, you can imagine a scenario where it was created by humans, then you can't be sure. Okay, so how do you avoid that? Well, if you see an object maneuvering in the sky in ways that human technologies cannot reproduce, or if you see something in space that has properties that look like a technological gadget, but it's not a rock, it's not an asteroid, it's not a comet, but it moves close to Earth, so you can take a close-up photograph, and you see screws and bolts on it, and you know that it's moving too fast to be propelled by any propulsion that humans invented before, And by the way, we can tell that because we have the Webb telescope and we have Earth-based telescopes now. And if such an object shows up, we look at it with the Webb telescope, we look at it with a telescope from Earth, and from two different directions. They are 1 million miles apart, these two telescopes. So it's like having two eyes that look at an object moving, and you can pinpoint the three-dimensional trajectory very precisely and tell whether there is some artificial propulsion. So if you do these things and you realize, oh, this is a technological gadget moving faster than all spacecraft that humans ever produced, which is easy because all the spacecraft at most moved at tens of kilometers per second. So you just see something moving at more than 100 kilometers per second. That's it. Like if something moves that way and it's not just moving based on the sun's gravity, that it's a technological gadget. So there are ways to tell for sure. You don't need to hold a grain of material that some hacker could have produced, or you don't need to go to a ranch where you don't know who is doing whatever they are doing out there. My point is there are ways to prove beyond any reasonable doubt that something technological from outside of this earth is coming our way. And we better focus on those first, because arguing about things that humans can hack is not a good approach. Like if there is an object that looks like a balloon, like the four objects that were shut down by the US government, there is no point arguing whether there might be extraterrestrial or not. Even though in principle, can imagine an extraterrestrial technological balloon that was dropped on Earth, you can imagine that, but there is no point in doing that because humans can do it. Okay, so the simplest, if Occam's razor, the simplest explanation would be to say, well, first of all, if you see made in China on it, it's humans. Second, if you retrieve it, you can check what it is. Third, if it looks like something that is very common that humans do all the time, like weather balloons, something, that it's human. So let's not work in this gray area and focus on things that are unusual but could be made by humans. Okay, that's not the place you want to be when you make a discovery. The place where you want to be is something that cannot, without doubt, cannot be related to humans or to nature. And that's what I'm focusing on.
Now, and again, and only in defense of this metamaterial that I was so jazzed about is the isotopic ratios. And I'm not a scientist, but to my knowledge, you cannot rearrange that unless you use a particle accelerator or something like that.
But we have particle accelerators on Earth.
Sure. So do you really think that in the 40s, somebody made and some people have even said, hey, it could just be slag from like a metal smelting factory and hence all the layers. But what is the probability of that in that time frame and things that exceed? I mean, metallurgists look at it and go, hell, we could barely make that by today's standards, right? And I agree with you. Most of it is probably explainable. Don't waste your time. Look to the outside. But do you think that there is a chance there is some materials that we have from some type of other technology or craft or whatever?
Yeah, there is a chance. But my point is, in order to make the first step at convincing everyone to be on board, you need evidence beyond any reasonable doubt, just like in the courtroom. Yeah. And so we need to go in that direction. Okay, so instead of arguing forever about the gray zone, things that could be one way or another, and it's just a matter of probabilities, instead of arguing about that, let's collect evidence on something that is beyond any doubt. Right. Because it's sufficient to have one thing, just one thing. You don't need more than that. There were hundreds of reports in the ODNI report to Congress, hundreds in 2022, hundreds in 2021, and maybe most of them are human-made. I mean, it's in fact the 2022 report to Congress admitted that about half of the objects might be balloons and a small fraction may be drones. They admitted that, so we know it's a mixed bag. And from the point of view of national intelligence, from a point of view of security threats, you want to know what all of them are. So, right. So the work of government is complementary to the work of science in the sense that government is interested in human-made objects. For me, these are boring. And I said that to government officials. I said, look, if we have any data about human-made objects, you can have it. I don't want to look at it. If it says made in China, that's boring. To me, to them, it's their day job. However, if it came from outside of this earth, has nothing to do with national borders. It's a piece, it's an object that is of scientific interest. Science goes across national borders. It's knowledge that should be shared by all humans, okay? So at that point, it becomes a subject of scientific inquiry. That's where I come to the stage and complement the work of government. The government is not a scientific organization. They are mostly concerned with national security threats. And so I say, okay, well, my territory is completely separate from your territory. I don't need to know what you're seeing. I'm happy that you're shooting down balloons. Why am I happy? Because it reduces the clutter in the sky. It reduces the noise. As far as I'm concerned, let them shoot all the balloons. Let them trap all the other objects that are human-made. I will be delighted, because then in the Galileo data set, I will not have to deal with those human-made objects. Yeah. So I'm happy at what they're doing. We are doing complementary tasks, and I don't care about human-made objects. But the key question that I'm trying to address is whether just one or more of the UAP, and I don't need many of them to be that way, just one, is of extraterrestrial origin.
Nice. Now, before we let you go, sir, I know your time is precious and we want to hold you to just an hour like we promised, but we have to talk about the 9th annual conference that's taking place for Contact in the Desert. I know that you will be attending this. Is it virtually that you're attending the conference?
Yes, virtually, because it's getting close to the time when I need to go on the expedition, yes.
Well, that makes sense, yeah. And it's taking place on June 2nd to June 4th, and this is going to take place at the Renaissance Resort in Indian Wells, California. And what is it? You'll have over 60 different lectures, 40 workshops, 11 panels, and interactive events. Basically, it's a plethora of who's who in ufology that's attending this thing, and it seems like whoever shows up is going to have a fantastic time. There's quite a bit going on there. So how close after this event are you taking off to do the expedition?
Well, the date is not fixed because we are still in the process of getting all the permissions. But it will be this summer, and it may not be very far after this conference, but I don't have a final date yet.
Nice. And Louis, do you have any final questions for our guest
No,
today?
just a big thanks to our good friend Avi Loeb. It's always fun chatting with you. I love your boldness. I love that you get pissed off. I do too. I'm known on this show for getting fired up, and I think it's important. If it's not for people saying, "Let me do my work," and if you want to play over there, but just leave me be. And good for you for clarifying too that you're using the scientific method to do your work. Yeah. You're putting it out there for peer review. What's other people doing, and how do they have anything to balance that? So right. Thank you for doing what we're doing. We hope you win a Nobel Prize and solve the solution of dark energy. That would be phenomenal. And you make us proud. We are science-minded. We are UAP Studies. So.
And if it turns out that you were right about the dark energy, you got to come back on. We got to talk about that. Yeah.
But, a bigger item would be if indeed we have technological objects from another civilization in our backyard, that would be far more important for the future of humanity. So either way, I will be delighted to report, because I'm seeking knowledge that would be shared with all humans. So we will all benefit from it. Let's just wait until we have the data, and it's not waiting for too long, because I think in the coming year we'll already have some interesting results. So I'll be glad to appear again.
For sure. Nice. Yeah. And after your expedition and after your Galileo Project findings are published, let's have you back on and let's draw some conclusions.
I should tell you that just a week ago I had 25 emails from filmmakers and producers who want to cover my work in a documentary, and there was even a playwright that wants to produce a show on Broadway about my research. So
wow,
be like Avi Loeb Superstar with Technicolor lights and everything else.
No, the title of the email, and it came just a few days before April Fool's Day, and I thought maybe it's just a joke, but ended up being real, because the guy sent attached photos with Barbara Streisand and Dick Van Dyke, and they all had the serial numbers of his cell phone, so that was obviously not a hack. But at any event, the title of the email was Avi Loeb on Broadway, and I thought, what is this? And it turned out to be real. So anyway, there are people inspired by the work, but I'm not distracted. I'm just focusing on the work, and I'm glad that others find it inspiring.
Yeah. Awesome. And they'll make a movie about you someday. So, start thinking about which actor you want to represent you in the film, right?
Oh,
I can wear glasses and part my hair. I used to comb it that way when I was in high school. So love having you, Avi. Thanks again for your time. We really appreciate it. And look forward to chatting to you again soon.
Thank you.
Are you paying attention?